Your bathroom grout is not permanently gray, and it never was. Take the brown bottle of hydrogen peroxide from under your sink, the ordinary 3% kind, and run a thin line along the worst seam of tile in your bathroom. Leave it for 15 minutes. Come back with an old toothbrush and scrub in short strokes across the line rather than along it. The gray lifts because the peroxide is breaking down the mold and mineral staining sitting inside the porous grout, not bleaching the tile around it, and you'll see the seam lighten before the second minute is up. That's one of 9 things in this video, and it isn't the one that surprised me most. None of the other 8 need anything stronger than what's already under your sink, and none of them cost you a trip to the shop. Not because we're tidier people, or more careful, or some upgraded version of you with better habits. I'm Ingrid. I grew up outside Gothenburg, and my mother has kept a bottle of hydrogen peroxide next to the dish soap for as long as I can remember, on the same shelf, in the same spot, since before I was old enough to reach it. 9 things, in order: grout, cutting boards, collars, sponges, the mold that builds up around cold windows, toothbrush holders, mugs and thermoses, berries, and the one bottle by the sink that quietly does the work of all the others put together. Do these 9 things this week, and the house will smell different before it looks different, which is usually the first sign that something is actually working rather than performing. I'm saving number 1 for the end. It's the simplest thing on this list, and it's the one that changed how I clean more than anything else here. One thing before we start. This video is 9 habits. I wrote a book with 150 of them, called The Nordic Way, 128 pages covering the whole house and the whole year. Cleaning, sleep, light, food, and what we never buy. It's a PDF, it's on my site, and the link is under this video. I won't bring it up again. One caution before the list. Everything here uses ordinary 3% hydrogen peroxide from a brown bottle. Nothing stronger, and it never shares a container with vinegar or bleach. Pour it, use it, rinse it away, and put the lid back on before you reach for anything else under the sink. Number 9. This is the one I opened with, so here's the part I left out. The same trick works on the white sealant around a bath or shower once it's gone yellow at the corners, and a cotton pad soaked through and pressed flat against the seam for 20 minutes will do what a whole bottle of specialist sealant cleaner is sold to do. Grout and sealant are the 2 places a bathroom actually shows its age, and they're also the 2 places most people quietly give up on and start planning a renovation around instead, years before the tiles themselves have done anything wrong at all. Number 8 is the cutting board, and this is where most kitchens get it wrong without knowing it. A wooden board that's been used for raw chicken or fish gets a wipe and a rinse and goes straight back in the rack, which cleans the surface but does nothing for what's sitting down inside the grain, in the tiny cuts a knife leaves behind after months of use. In our house, the board gets sprayed with peroxide straight from the bottle, left to sit for a few minutes while you deal with the pan, then rinsed and stood on its edge to dry, rather than laid flat against a wet counter. It replaces the antibacterial cutting board sprays sold specifically for this job, at a fraction of the price, and it works just as well on plastic boards, though wood is where it actually matters. A board treated this way most nights stops smelling like anything at all, which is the plainest test you have for whether it's actually clean. Number 7 is collars and pillowcases. The ones that go gray or yellow along the edge no matter how hot you wash them or how much detergent you use. That color is sweat and skin oil sitting deep in the fibers rather than surface dirt, which is exactly why ordinary detergent moves straight past it without touching it, wash after wash, for years. A capful of peroxide worked directly into the collar with an old toothbrush. Before the shirt goes in, the machine breaks that down at a level detergent alone doesn't reach, and it does it without the smell or the slow fading that comes with chlorine bleach on colored fabric. It replaces the specialist stain pens and pre-wash sprays sold for exactly this, and it works on the same white pillowcase problem that no amount of extra detergent ever seems to fix. Number 6 is the sponge by your sink, which is very possibly the single dirtiest object in your kitchen, dirtier most days than the inside of the bin. It sits damp for hours at a time, which is exactly the condition it needs to keep getting worse rather than better, no matter how much soap passes through it. A sponge or dish brush left to soak in a bowl of diluted peroxide for 10 minutes, then rinsed and left to dry properly upright rather than flat in a puddle on the counter, comes back smelling like nothing at all, which is the correct smell for a clean sponge to have. This one replaces the sponge itself, in a sense, because it's the reason ours last months instead of the week or two. Most people quietly throw theirs away after. That's 5 things in, and here's what all 5 actually have in common. Every one of them is a job a separate, specifically branded product exists to solve, and every one of them is solved instead by one bottle that costs almost nothing and already lives under your sink. Keep that in mind, because the last 4 lean on it even harder than the first 5 did. Quick pause before the last 4. Everything in this video is one section of that book. Section 2, Cleaning the Nordic Way. There are 9 sections in total, and the one people write to me about most is What Scandinavians Never Buy, which walks through the ordinary household products most Nordic homes quietly stopped replacing years ago, starting with fabric softener. Same link under the video. Now, number 5. Number 5 is the mold that builds along cold window frames and the edges of shower tiles, which shows up faster in a Nordic climate than almost anywhere else because of how much condensation a cold window collects overnight through the whole winter. Sprayed on and left for 10 minutes before wiping with a dry cloth, peroxide breaks the mold down at the root, rather than just lifting the visible black off the surface, which is the difference between it going away and it coming straight back within the week looking exactly the same. It replaces the specialist mold and mildew sprays sold in every supermarket for this single job, and unlike most of them, it doesn't leave the sharp chemical smell that lingers in a small bathroom for hours after you've used it. Number 4 is smaller, and it's the one nobody thinks to do. The toothbrush holder by your bathroom sink is damp almost constantly, sitting a few centimeters from the sink itself, which makes it one of the more reliably unpleasant objects in the whole house if you were to actually look closely at the bottom of it. Emptied out, sprayed, left for 5 minutes and rinsed once a week, it stops being that, and the brushes standing in it stop picking up whatever was building up underneath them. It replaces the antibacterial holder inserts sold as an accessory for exactly this problem, for the cost of 5 minutes and something already on your shelf. Number 3 is coffee and tea stains, the brown ring that builds up inside a mug or a thermos no matter how well you rinse it after every single use. A capful of peroxide with warm water, left to sit for 20 minutes and then rinsed properly, lifts a ring that's been building for months rather than days, and it does it without the metallic taste that comes from scrubbing with baking soda or the abrasive scratching that dulls the glaze underneath. It replaces the specialist denture-style cleaning tablets some people drop into a stained thermos, at almost no cost, and it works on the inside of a flask lid, which is usually where the smell is actually coming from. Number 2 is berries, and this is the one that gets the most questions whenever I mention it. A short soak in water with a small amount of peroxide added, followed by a thorough rinse under the tap, measurably slows the mold that makes soft fruit collapse in the fridge within 2 or 3 days of buying it, which is normally around the time half the punnet quietly goes in the bin uneaten. It isn't a trick that changes the taste, and it isn't one you'd notice unless you were comparing 2 identical punnets side by side, which is exactly what my mother did the first time she tried it and refused to stop doing since. It replaces nothing you'd buy specifically, which is probably why so few people have heard of it, but it buys you 3 or 4 extra days on fruit that's otherwise gone by the weekend. Number 1 is the plainest thing on this list, and every other idea here eventually fails without it. It's a spray bottle, filled with 3% peroxide and an equal amount of water, kept next to the one you already use for glass, and reached for instead of switching between 4 or 5 different cleaners for 4 or 5 different surfaces. Counters, the inside of the fridge, door handles, the chopping area, all of it, one bottle, refilled rather than replaced once it runs low. It isn't exciting, and it doesn't photograph well, and it will never be the thing that makes a video thumbnail, but it's the one habit the other 8 quietly depend on to keep working, week after week, long after the novelty of any of the others has worn off. Here's what I want you to know about why nobody taught you this. The cleaning aisle in any shop is built to sell you a different bottle for every surface in your house. One for glass, one for wood, one for the bathroom, one for the kitchen. Because a shelf of 5 specialized products earns more than a single bottle that does the job of all 5. It isn't an accident, and it isn't your fault. Nobody in that industry is rewarded for telling you that one bottle, used properly, replaces most of what's sitting either side of it. You don't have to keep buying 5 different answers to what is, underneath it, one plain question. Don't try all 9 tonight. Pick one, the sponge or the spray bottle, and just do that one before bed. Which of these 9 would actually make the biggest difference in your house? Tell me the number below. Next time, I'm taking number 1 further and going through everything else that bottle can replace once you actually trust it. There's a bottle under my sink that's outlasted every specialist cleaner I've ever bought and thrown away.